You see the numbers, and I'm sure we'll get into it, of Gen Z and college-educated Gen Z, college-educated female Gen Z who are voting for this in New York. There's a big portion of Gen Z that needs to go to American re-education camps. And I know what that basically means, re-education camps. I'm not talking about, the really, really bad kind. But there's a whole segment of society that genuinely needs to be re-educated on what America is and what America is not. And America is not Zohran Mamdani. You're telling me that a democratic socialist communist jihadist is gonna be mayor?
Yeah, Adam Sosnick wanting to send Americans to re-education camps simply because they have a different political or economic perspective makes it pretty clear that maybe he's the one who needs a refresher course on what America really is. And no, Zohran Mamdani is not a jihadist. He's just smeared as one by those who don't like the fact that he's ballsy enough to criticize Israel, which is basically a third rail among most American politicians, for reasons that were actually perfectly outlined by Libertarian Congressman Thomas Massie.
Everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What's that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC. They're probably a constituent in your district, but they are, firmly embedded in AIPAC. And
every member has something like this?
I don't know how it works on the Democrat side, but that's how it works on the Republican side. And when they come to DC, you go have lunch with them. I guarantee there's some spreadsheet at AIPAC where the AIPAC dude who's matched up with the congressman is there, and then all the congressman's votes on the issue. Oh, has the congressman been to Israel? They pay for trips for congressmen and their spouses to go to Israel.
I'm pretty sure it works the same way on the Democratic side, just based on their behavior. But nonetheless, Mamdani also happens to be literally the only New York City mayoral candidate who stated during a debate that he wanted to stay in the city to, quote, address the concerns of New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs. Every single other candidate named a foreign country that they wanted to travel to immediately after getting elected as mayor. 4 of them, including former disgraced New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, declared that their country of choice is Israel. And I know how hard it is for someone like Sosnick to understand, because of the fact that he has family in Israel, that most Americans actually want leaders who want to take care of business here at home. Plus, New York City is still a Democratic stronghold, and Democrats aren't exactly vibing with genocide in Gaza these days.
Andrew Cuomo, during the primary, attacked Mamdani as being insufficiently pro-Israel. I'm not quite sure the former governor understood how much the politics have changed around this issue among Democrats. What are we talking about here? All right, who Democrats sympathize more with, Israelis or Palestinians? In 2017, the Democratic Party was a pro-Israeli party. Look at this. They sympathized with the Israelis by 13 points, more with the Israelis than the Palestinians. But look at this sea change. Now Democrats sympathize more with the Palestinians by 43 points. Oh my God, that is a change in the margin of 56 points over the course of just 8 years.
Well, I mean, when you get nearly 2 years of these insane images and videos showing children being slaughtered, hearing, stories and testimony from American doctors who risked their lives to go to Gaza in order to try to save people's lives, when they come back and they talk about how infants, toddlers are showing up in the hospital with bullet wounds to their heads, it's gonna start changing people's minds about whether it makes sense to support Israel at any and all costs. But nonetheless, I really do want to try to explain the rise of Mamdani, a democratic socialist who does appear poised, at least for now, to win the general election and become New York City's new mayor. His popularity really isn't that hard to understand because his campaign emphasized policies that redistribute wealth and tackle the precarity American workers have been suffering, rather than protect the status quo that has severely widened economic inequality, especially in a high cost of living city like New York. It's not some fluke or an accident that young voters find Mamdani's socialist policies appealing, especially at a time when achieving what used to be considered normal milestones, like buying a home, is really out of reach for most young Americans. Now look, the cost of living has exploded while wages have largely remained stagnant since the 1970s. Homelessness, as you see from this video, has exploded across the country in recent years, and it isn't rare to see makeshift structures housing people on the side of highways. This is the richest country in the world, and this is what we're dealing with. Homelessness in the United States has been a rising trend for years, in fact, since 2017. According to data from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, there were 771,480 people recorded as homeless in 2024, nearly 1 million people. That's insane. That represents an increase of over 18% from just a year earlier in 2023. The data show that 36% of the homeless were unsheltered. That is, they lived in places not considered fit for human habitation, with the remainder living in emergency shelters, transitional housing, or safe haven programs. By the way, this survey does not count people who live in overcrowded apartments or in government subsidized accommodation as homeless. Mamdani's campaign made a point to address housing and more. He even made a point to reach out to Trump voters to get a better understanding of why they decided to support the president in the last race.
And we didn't just win places that were considered to be progressive. We won neighborhoods that voted for Donald Trump. We won neighborhoods that voted for Eric Adams. New York was the state that swung most towards Donald Trump, 11.5 points. And that swing happened far from the caricatures of Trump voters. It happened in the hearts of immigrant New York City. And when I went to Fordham Road in the Bronx, when I went to Hillside Avenue in Queens a few days after that election, and I asked Democrats, who did you vote for and why? They told me again and again, they voted for Donald Trump because they remembered being able to afford their life 4 years ago more than they could today. They cited their rent, their groceries, their child care. And I asked them, what would it take to bring you back? And they said, a relentless focus on an economic agenda.
And that's what he did. Focusing on the bread and butter issues was a smart campaign strategy for Mamdani, someone who clearly wanted to win, who wanted to, touch the hearts of the very constituents who ended up supporting him, especially at a time when the other Democratic candidates were preaching for more of the same, with maybe a few tweaks around the edges. In fact, now that I think about it, Mamdani's rise really should not be hard for Trump supporters like Sosnick to understand, considering their beloved Gulf resort dweller paid a lot of lip service to the economic frustrations of working Americans as well. It's just that Trump clearly wasn't serious about most of it, or any of it. The president's so-called big beautiful bill ensures deep cuts to the nation's social safety net that helps the poorest Americans, while the richest will get to enjoy even deeper tax cuts.
One of the biggest battle lines when it comes to the president's tax cut and spending bill are the cuts to Medicaid, and the very real impact those cuts will have on millions of Americans, especially in rural communities. Nearly 12 million Americans are expected to lose health insurance with this bill. That includes almost 2 million in rural areas. And one report estimates nearly 400 rural hospitals would be at risk of closing if the proposed cuts go into effect.
Pretty sure that there will be some political consequences for this bill, but notably, the Senate version of the big travesty of a bill cuts $1.1 trillion from Medicaid and also slashes funding for SNAP benefits, food assistance. While the United States is already spending $1 trillion a year just to service our $37 trillion in federal debt, Trump's budget bill exacerbates that situation by tacking on trillions more in debt. The tax savings provisions that would actually benefit ordinary Americans, like no tax on tips and overtime, well, that will be means tested. If you're making more than $150,000 a year, you will not qualify for it. And those tax savings provisions for working class Americans are set to expire in just 4 years. The tax cuts for the rich, oh, don't worry, those are permanent. And as less and less taxpayer money goes toward taking care of our own here in the United States, more and more gets doled out for Israel's genocidal campaign in Gaza and the West Bank. The United States has provisionally agreed via a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, to provide Israel with $3.8 billion per year through 2028. Funneling cash to Israel is the most bipartisan effort imaginable. So let's actually start with the Biden administration. Between October 7th, 2023 and November of 2024, the United States has enacted legislation providing at least $12.5 billion in direct military aid to Israel, which includes $3.8 billion in line with the current MOU and $8.7 billion from a Supplemental Appropriations Act in April 2024. There are other estimates with higher numbers because these estimates actually take into consideration the cost of restocking American weapons that had been sent to Israel. So Linda Bilmes et al. From Brown University have reported that Israel received $17.9 billion in US military aid during this period, a figure that additionally accounts for the cost to the United States Defense Department of replenishing the stock of weapons provided to Israel. Not only does the United States largely provide offensive weaponry for Israel, American taxpayers are also maintaining Israel's defense capabilities as well. Additionally, $500 million a year is slated for Israeli and joint US-Israeli missile defense programs in which the two countries collaborate on the research, development, and production of these systems used by Israel, including Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow 2. Now, that's a pretty comprehensive list of taxpayer resources the Biden administration was willing to take out of your pocket and ship on over to a country that's been occupying, persecuting, and slaughtering innocent Palestinians literally for decades. But there's a new stooge in town, and his administration ain't any better. On this matter, I mean, just take a look at what Trump has managed to do in the short time that he's been in office for a second term. In March of this year, Trump's Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, put out a statement bragging about the redistribution of your wealth to Israel, writing that since taking office, the Trump administration has approved nearly $12 billion in major FMS, that means weapon sales, to Israel. The State Department, by the way, also reported that as of April of this year, the United States has 751 active foreign military sales cases with Israel that are valued at nearly $40 billion. That's 40 billion of your dollars if you're an American taxpayer. US aid reportedly accounts for 15% of Israel's defense budget. Americans are dealing with a housing crisis, drug overdose epidemic, unsafe drinking water, unimaginable economic inequality, a broken healthcare system, and more. Yet a whopping 78% of Israel's arms imports came from and were paid for by the United States. No money for Medicaid, but endless funds for genocide. So if anyone is wondering why all of these disgusting smears about Mamdani being a jihadist or an alleged anti-Semite, why they're not working, maybe it's because the candidate's economic priorities are shared by the very voters who helped him trounce Andrew Cuomo. Refusing to serve Israel before the American people should not be controversial. Refusing to prioritize New Yorkers as the mayor of New York City should be. So that's my take on Mamdani. And this is the winning strategy. You focus on the issues that impact the pocketbooks of Americans, make their lives better, okay? Don't feed into the BS culture war topics that are only meant to distract from the economic policies that Americans want to focus on and hear about. Focus on the bread and butter issues. Focus on what your policies are and how you intend to make people's lives better. There was a lot of that in Trump's campaign, regardless of how you feel about him, and we all know that he wasn't serious about any of it. With Mamdani, I think there's a possibility that he is very serious about these ideas and that he intends to try to implement them. Nonetheless, smearing him as a jihadist because he has the audacity to be openly critical of the genocide that Israel is currently engaging in is ridiculous to me, and it's not working, and I'm happy to see that.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.